It begins in the dark. A single candle throws a trembling halo across stone walls, catching on the flecks of chaff that hang in the air. The sound is relentless, the groan of a spinning wheel, the dry hiss of straw between fingers. Somewhere beyond the reach of the light, a figure watches. He is no taller than a child, his limbs thin as stilts, his eyes glinting like wet coal. And when he speaks, the voice is both playful and sharp enough to cut. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments. If you're into this kind of deep dive, tap like and subscribe. The story you know moves fast. A poor miller's daughter is dragged before a king. Straw litters the floor of a high tower room. She is told to spin it into gold before morning or die. She weeps until a stranger appears. He can spin straw into gold, he says, but nothing comes free. One night, it costs her a necklace. The next, a ring. On the third, with nothing left to give, she promises her firstborn child. Time skips forward. The girl becomes queen. The child is born, and the bargain comes due. The little man returns, grinning, arms outstretched. She begs. He relents on one condition. Guess his name within 3 days, and she may keep the baby. She fails twice, but on the third night, a servant follows the man into the forest. They spy him dancing around a fire, singing a rhyme that gives away his name, Rumpelstiltskin. When she speaks it aloud, the imp shrieks, stamps the floor so hard it cracks, and vanishes sometimes into a hole, sometimes in a puff of smoke, and in the earliest, Grimm telling, by tearing himself in two. It's a compact fable, cruel bargains, impossible tasks, a single, deadly loophole. But beneath the surface is something stranger, a game of power built on a name. Why does knowing it destroy him? And why does this pattern appear not just in one country, but across half the world? The stakes are bigger than a single fairy tale. Names, in folklore, are not just labels, they are weapons. To know someone's true name is to hold their life in your hands. In Rumpelstiltskin's chamber, the stakes are life, death, and the lineage of a kingdom. For early listeners, it was a reminder that words, just as much as gold, could buy freedom or ruin. The version most of us know was first printed in the early 19th century by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm in their Kinder- und Hausmärchen. They claimed to have gathered it from oral sources, including a woman named Henriette Wilde, but their 1812 edition was already shaped for the page shorter sentences, rhythmic triads, and a moral frame. The threat is stark, but the tone is polished. The imp is otherworldly, but not demonic. The girl is passive, but not punished. By the time it reached middle-class parlors, this was no longer a fireside ghost story. It was a lesson in cleverness, tucked in a nursery book. And yet, the bones of the tale are older. In France, around 1696, Marie-Jeanne L'Héritier de Villandon published Rigdin Rigdon in the 12th volume of Le Cabinet des Fées. Her heroine does not spin straw into gold, but proves her domestic genius in other ways, bargaining with a mysterious helper whose name must be uncovered. Go further back, and in the mid-15th century, you find an English-Scottish ballad, Inter Diabolus et Virgo, Between the Devil and the Maiden, where the heroine saves herself by unmasking her captor through his name. These aren't identical plots, but the engine is the same. The salvation hidden in a name, the danger of a bargain poorly understood. Picture that tower again. The straw smells sweet and dry, but there's rot underneath hay bales damp from the rain. The candle sputters, the air is close, the wheel's treadle thumps like a heartbeat. In the corner, the little man waits, fingertips tapping on the wood, knowing she will break before he does. But here's where it gets strange. If the oldest secure date we have is 1696, why do folklorists like Hans-Jörg Uther slot it into an international tale type ATU 500 shared across languages and centuries. Could the idea itself, if not the name Rumpelstiltskin, be far older? That's the question that pulls us out of the tower and into the archives, where the paper trail turns patchy, the names shift like shadows, and the bargains get darker the further back we go. Imagine the journey of a story as a trail of smoke, thin, curling, hard to grasp, yet somehow drifting across borders and centuries. The Rumpelstiltskin you recognize, with its polished Grimm edges, is only the latest wisp in a much older plume. To track it back, you need to follow where the smoke thickens, where it leaves soot behind. In the first printed pages, the first whispers in ballads, the first courtroom or fireside where the name was spoken aloud. The earliest print we can pin with confidence comes not from Germany at all, but from France. In the late 1700s, 1696 to be precise, Marie-Jeanne l'Héritier de Villandon slips Richtin into the 12th volume of Le Cabinet des Fées. The setting is elegant, the tone urbane. This is the salon fairy tale tradition crafted for aristocratic ears, where the heroine's wit and household skill win her survival. But behind the powdered wigs and candlelit gatherings, the plot hums with something far older. A bargain, a secret name, a deadline. Fast forward just over a century. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm publish Kinder- und Hausmärchen in 1812. And there, in the first edition, sits Rumpelstiltskin. Their source? Oral tellings from rural Germany, including Henriette Wild. But the Grimms are not neutral scribes, they revise heavily. By the 1819 edition, the prose is smoother, the menace dulled in places, and the structure tightened into a near-perfect three-night suspense cycle. The rougher edges of the oral versions are sanded down for middle-class readers. The threat to the Queen's child remains, but the language is less blood-curdling, the imp less monstrous, the moral more about cleverness than cosmic danger. Go further back, and the printed trail thins, but another ember glows. The mid-15th century English-Scottish ballad, Inter Diabolus et Virgo. In this tale, a maiden is trapped by a devilish figure and can only escape by learning his name. No spinning wheel, no straw, but the same knife-edge dependence on a secret word. Scholars like D.L. Ashliman point to it as an early cousin in the same storytelling family, though not necessarily a direct ancestor. The pattern here is clear. Oral tradition first, then literary capture, then adaptation for new audiences. The direction is almost always from earthier, darker fireside tellings toward the curated parlor versions, and with each step, the tale is shaped by the medium and the moment. The French salons soften the menace into wit. The Grimm's Germany reframes it as a moral tale. Victorian English editions sand off the cruelty for the nursery. Transmission was helped by the rise of print culture in the 18th and 19th centuries. Collections like Le Cabinet des Fées and Kinder- und Hausmärchen spread stories far beyond their original dialect zones. Before that, they moved slower by the lips of traders, traveling performers, and servants crossing regional boundaries. A peddler might hear a Scottish name-guessing rhyme in one village and carry it 2 counties over, where the local tongue reshapes it into something new. In the Dutch Low Countries, the figure becomes Rumpelstiltskin. In Norway, Rumpelstiltskin. In Finland, Tittelintua. Names mutate to fit local mouths, but the bargain stays the same. By the time Rumpelstiltskin reaches the broad European audience of the 19th century, it is both everywhere and nowhere. The versions differ in costume, setting, and side details, but the skeleton is unshakable. The impossible task, the supernatural helper, the hidden price, and the single loophole of a name. Think of it like a coin passed from hand to hand. The image on its face, whether it's Richtin, Tom Tit Tot, or Rumpelstiltskin, changes with the die, but the weight, the feel of the metal, stays the same. You can tell it's the same coin, even if the engraving is different. So when did this coin first get minted? The honest answer, we don't know. The oldest secure inscription we have is that 1696 French print. But the mid-15th century ballad suggests the motif, if not the exact plot, was already in circulation more than 2 centuries earlier. Some folklorists suggest an even older oral pedigree, perhaps medieval or earlier, but the trail vanishes into the smoke of unrecorded tellings. That gap is where imagination creeps in, and sometimes where myths are born. You've probably seen headlines calling Rumpelstiltskin a 4,000-year-old story, linking it to Mesopotamian myths or Bronze Age oral traditions. The truth is, we have no direct evidence for that. What we do have is an international tale type, ATU 500, that includes variants from dozens of cultures, some of which are very old in their own right. The motif of a supernatural helper, undone by his own name, could, in theory, be ancient. But as for Rumpelstiltskin himself, his paper trail begins in the early modern period. Still, the way this tale traveled shifting languages, softening edges, crossing class boundaries, tells us something important. It was sticky. It caught in people's minds. And it did so because of its structure, its hook, and the primal shiver of that final reveal. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. Folklorists have mapped this tale onto an entire global taxonomy, complete with its own number and a set of motifs it shares with stories from vastly different cultures. Which means that the little man in the motley tunic is just one mask in a masquerade that may stretch across continents and millennia. Picture a library, not of books, but of stories, hundreds of thousands of them, each tagged, cross-referenced, and slotted into place. This is the world of folkloristics, and it has its own cataloguing system, the Arne Thompson Uther Index, a vast taxonomy that treats oral tales like biological species. Each species gets a number, a definition, and a set of known variants. Rumpelstiltskin, in this system, is ATU 500, the name of the supernatural helper. The definition is deceptively simple. A human receives aid from a supernatural being in exchange for a promise, often something precious, like a child. The helper can be defeated if the human discovers and uses the being's true name. But within that scaffolding, the tales vary wildly in setting, tone, and moral weight. Some are riddles, some are survival horror, some are almost comedies. ATU 500 is old, at least as a motif. Its core code appears in Thompson's Motif Index under D732. 1. Name guessing to escape from a supernatural antagonist, and in related sub-motifs about secret names and magical contracts. You see echoes in Scottish Tom Tit Tot, in the Finnish Tittelintua, in the Dutch Rumpelstiltskin, and as far afield as certain West African and South Asian folk tales, where a demon or spirit can be banished by uttering its hidden name. From the standpoint of raw dating, the math is straightforward. Take the earliest secure print, Marie-Jeanne L'Héritier's Rigden Richten, in 1696, and subtract from the current year, 2025. That gives you roughly 329 years. If you prefer the Grimm publication date of 1812, the figure drops to 213. Either way, the gap to 4,000 years is generous. Yet the motif's portability means it could have hopped cultures much earlier than the written record. Names themselves have power in folklore. The German Rumpelstiltskin fuses Rumpeln to make a noise, with Stelzer, stilt, and the diminutive chen, rendering something like little rattlestilt. It's a word that feels awkward in the protic. Mouth like a splinter. Other languages localize it. Norwegian Rummeleskaft rolls differently. Dutch Rumpelstiltskin softens the consonants. Finnish Tittelintua turns it almost into a chant. In all cases, the name is odd, memorable, and carries the ring of the uncanny. This isn't accidental. A name that sounds like it doesn't belong to your world is more than a label. It's a border marker. Cross it, and you step into the supernatural. Pronounce it, and you pull something from that other place into your own. That's the logic of the loophole. By speaking Rumpelstiltskin's name, the queen doesn't just identify him. She collapses the barrier that protects his magic. Scholars like Hans-Jörg Uther keep ATU 500 distinct from related helper stories because the name-guessing element is so culturally resonant. It's not enough to win by trickery, bribery, or force. You must win by knowing. In pre-literate societies, where oral memory was both a communal asset and a personal arsenal, this kind of victory reaffirmed the value of sharp ears and a quick mind. Imagine the fireside where such a tale might be told, the crackle of logs, the clink of someone turning a spindle in idle hands, the children leaning in as the storyteller pauses before revealing the name. That pause is the moment the whole room leans toward the flame. It's a narrative device so strong it transcends time and medium. But if this is a species of story, what are its closest relatives? How do we know we're looking at the same genus when the costumes change? That's where comparative folklore work gets tricky, and where the next layer of our investigation takes us, out of Europe entirely, into other continents, languages, and histories, to see how far the smoke from this little straw-strewn room has drifted. Step outside the stone tower. The air changes, the accent changes, sometimes even the stakes change. But the skeleton of the story, the bargain, the hidden name, the final reveal remains standing, dressed in different cultural clothes. In the English county of Suffolk, late 19th century collectors found Tom Tit Tot, a story told in a thick, rural dialect. Here, a boastful mother claims her daughter can spin 5 skeins a day for a month. The king demands it, and a little black imp appears to help on the condition that after a month the girl must guess his name. The servant's eavesdropping reveals the imp chanting his name in the woods, just as in Rumpelstiltskin. The Suffolk audience laughed at the rustic wit of the girl's final line, "Name's Tom Tit Tot," but the bargain's menace still hummed beneath the humour. In Finland, titelinture slips into oral tradition with a sing-song quality. The supernatural helper here might be a forest spirit, and the straw-to-gold task morphs into spinning flax or weaving. The helper's name is strange enough to catch in your ear, but rhythmic enough to be remembered after a single telling vital in an oral society. Across the North Sea in the Netherlands, Rumpelstiltskin shows up in 19th century compilations. The plot hews close to the Grimm version, but the name itself softer, with lilting syllables, suggests a sprite, more than a goblin. Norwegian Rumleskaft keeps the consonant rattle, like a pot being jostled on a wooden floor. Travel farther, and the connections get more diffuse, but still recognizable. In parts of West Africa, folktales feature trickster spirits who demand impossible tasks and can be banished by uttering their secret name. Names often learned by overhearing the spirit, boasting alone in the bush. In some South Asian stories, a Rakshasa or Yaksha sets terms for release, undone when the hero overhears a self-referential chant. These parallels raise questions. Are we looking at a single story, migrating along trade and migration routes, adapting to each stop? Or are we seeing the same problem, an overwhelming, magical obstacle solved in the same narrative way in multiple places independently? Folklorists debate this constantly. The name-guessing motif is compact enough to spring up wherever names hold supernatural weight, which is nearly everywhere. Back in Europe, the French Richton of 1696 turns the spinning room into a space of domestic display. Marie-Jeanne L'Héritier's heroine isn't under mortal threat, but she is navigating a social trap, performing impossible skill to win status, while fending off a dangerous helper. The name is still the key, but here it's about preserving autonomy in a courtly environment rather than saving a child's life. The Scottish and English ballad Inter Diabolus et Virgo strips it down further. The antagonist is explicitly the devil. The stakes are the maiden's soul. There's no gold, no loom, just a name, as the difference between damnation and freedom. The bones of ATU 500 stand bare. These analogues show two things at once. First, the astonishing portability of the tale's core. Second, how each culture fills in the gaps with its own fears and fascinations. In agrarian societies, the task is tied to spinning or weaving. In seafaring cultures, it might be about net-making or rope work. In deeply religious societies, the antagonist takes on a demonic face. Picture a market town in the late Middle Ages. Traders from 3 countries away are shouting in the square. A peddler overhears a tale in one tongue, carries it in memory to another. He adjusts the names to match the local soundscape, swaps the task to fit the tools in the audience's hands, but keeps the delicious tension of the 3-day deadline and the whispered name. The firelight scene plays out again, in a new dialect, but with the same gasp when the heroine speaks the final word. If this much variation exists in the last 500 years, what might the deeper roots look like? And do the changes in setting and task hint at something more symbolic than literal? A code embedded in the objects and numbers of the tale itself. That's where the trail leads next, away from names and into the gold itself, the threes, the wheels, and the little man's strange, stilted body. The straw is piled high, its smell sweet and brittle, its color a dull, lifeless yellow. By morning, it will be gold, soft to the touch, heavy in the hand, dazzling in the torchlight. In the story, this is magic at its most visual. In the language of symbolism, it's a transformation with layers. Straw to gold is the perfect metaphor for alchemy. In early modern Europe, alchemists sought to transmute base metals into precious ones, a quest that was as much about spiritual perfection as material wealth. Here, the miller's daughter becomes an unwitting alchemist, not through her own knowledge, but through the intervention of a supernatural agent. Scholars like those behind the Sur la Lune annotations suggest the gold is also social. The base, daughter of a poor tradesman, transformed into a queen through the currency of craft and marriage. The spinning wheel itself is more than just a prop. In medieval and early modern Europe, spinning was a cornerstone of women's domestic labor, tied to marriage prospects and economic survival. The wheel turns time into thread, raw plant into something useful. In the Rumpelstiltskin bargain, it turns survival into debt. When the wheel is present in the room, it's the ticking clock, its creak marking each moment closer to morning and judgment. And then there's the rule of 3. Folklore loves 3s. 3 tasks, 3 nights, 3 guesses. The number carries weight as a pattern of completeness, setup, development, resolution. In oral storytelling, 3s are easy to remember, build suspense, and make the payoff feel inevitable. Here, the 3 nights give the queen a rhythm: failure, near failure, triumph. The audience knows she will win on the last night, but not how, and that tension is the heartbeat of the tale. The name itself, Rumpelstiltskin, becomes part of the ritual. In German, Rumpeln is to make noise, to rattle, while Stelzi is a stilt or pole. Add the diminutive, chen, and you have something like little rattlestilt. It's a body in 2 halves, something tall and awkward, something small and noisy. Folk etymology links it to household goblins who rumple around in the attic, knocking boards. Either way, it's a name that sounds strange enough to be dangerous, yet playful enough to remember. Even the antagonist's shape matters. In some illustrations, he's thin-legged, as if balancing on stilts. In others, his proportions are off 2 long arms, too big head, signaling otherness, without needing horns or fangs. This fits a broader European visual code for the uncanny. Not monstrous, but misaligned. Color plays its role too. The yellow of straw and gold, the red of the fire he dances around, the black motley or spotted tunic in older illustrations. Each is a signal: gold for wealth and temptation, red for danger and life, black for the unknown. These would have been instantly legible to early audiences. The smell of the scene is heavy, damp straw, wax from the candle, the faint singe of a torch. In the mind's eye, you can hear the whir of the wheel, the scratching of straw against wood, the offbeat stamping of the little man as he works. The physicality of the scene roots the magic in a tactile world, making the transformation feel real even as it is impossible. If the tale is read through a ritual lens, it becomes a rite of passage. The girl enters the room a powerless subject and emerges a queen, but she must survive a liminal phase first locked in the spinning chamber, dependent on an outsider's power, bound by a taboo bargain. Only by mastering the trick, learning the name, can she re-enter the world with her new status intact. It's a journey from ignorance to knowledge, from debt to autonomy. And that might be the true gold in the story. The idea that knowing, naming, and timing can turn even the weakest position into a winning one. But not all readings are so uplifting. Some scholars argue that Rumpelstiltskin is less about empowerment and more about punishment, especially in the way the Grimms shaped it. That's where the debates begin, and where the myths about the tale's supposed ancient origins start to unravel. The first myth is right there in the title you've been promised. The 4,000-year-old secret. It's irresistible, isn't it? The idea that Rumpelstiltskin's origins stretch all the way back to Bronze Age Mesopotamia, whispered around campfires, when cities were still made of mud brick. But here's the reality check. There is no direct evidence for this. Folklorists work with what survives: ballads, court records, manuscript anthologies, and later printed collections. The earliest secure Rumpelstiltskin in anything like the form we recognize comes from France in 1696 in Marie-Jeanne L'Héritier's Rigden Rigdon. Earlier still, a mid-15th century English-Scottish ballad, Inter Diabolus et Virgo, has the name-guessing premise but strips away the spinning and gold. That's it. Beyond that, we are in the dark. The leap to 4,000 years isn't based on texts, it's based on the survival of a motif, ATU 500, in multiple cultures, some of which have older narrative traditions. That doesn't mean it's impossible. The motif is ancient, just that it's unprovable. Stories change shape too easily. A supernatural helper could be a goblin in Germany, a devil in Scotland, a forest spirit in Finland, or a rakshasa in India. The resemblance might be shared ancestry, or it might be coincidence born of similar narrative needs. Another common misreading is to treat the straw-to-gold transformation as proof of medieval alchemical belief. While the image does echo the language of transmutation, there's no evidence the tale was ever told as an alchemist's parable. It's a metaphor first and foremost, one that conveniently doubles as a vivid plot device. The same goes for treating the story as a historical record of spinning practices. Spinning rooms and wheels were real, but their presence in the tale serves symbolism and tension, not documentary accuracy. Then there's the question of morality. Ruth Bottigheimer's 1982 analysis argued that the Grimms reframed what could have been an empowerment story where a young woman uses cunning to escape a trap into a cautionary tale about vanity and debt. In this reading, the miller's boast sets the trap, the daughter's passivity keeps her bound, and her eventual escape is due to luck and outside help, not skill. Maria Tatar, in 1987, offers a more ironic take. The heroine rises to power not through spinning, but by avoiding it entirely, letting the magical helper do the work. For Tatar, this is a sly commentary on agency within rigid gender roles. And then there's the question of the imp himself. Is Rumpelstiltskin a villain, a victim, or something in between? In modern adaptations like Once Upon a Time, he's a tragic anti-hero, his bargains driven by curses and personal loss. That reimagining fits a 21st century appetite for morally complex characters, but it's far from the impish trickster of early European tellings. Censorship plays its role too. The Grimms themselves softened their own text between the 1812 and 1819 editions, sanding down violent or grotesque edges. In popular children's editions, the threat of losing the child is often softened or removed altogether. In some picture books, the little man simply storms off when his name is guessed. No harm done. The core bargain, arguably the heart of the story, gets erased for the sake of bedtime comfort. And let's not forget the fringe theories. Brewer's dictionary once suggested the name might mean wrinkled foreskin, a bit of folk etymology that's not linguistically supported but still circulates in trivia corners. There are also persistent claims tying the name-guessing motif to esoteric magical traditions or secret societies, claims that collapse under scrutiny but continue to thrive in internet folklore. So, where does this leave us? With a story that is neither as ancient nor as simple as it first appears. It's a tale that's been polished, repainted, and recast so many times that the original grain is impossible to see. What remains consistent are the bones, a desperate bargain, an impossible task, a loophole hidden in a name, and that constancy is its own kind of mystery. Why does this skeletal structure endure when so many other tales vanish? What is it about the sound of a secret name, spoken at the right moment, that makes people lean forward around the fire? To answer that, we have to return to the present and to the ways Rumpelstiltskin still stalks through our media, our memes, and our modern anxieties. The candle gutters, the tower room dissolves, and yet Rumpelstiltskin is still here. Only now he's on your screen, in your memes, in the plots of shows you've streamed without realizing you were watching his shadow. In 2011, ABC's Once Upon a Time turned him into a linchpin of an entire fantasy universe, a trickster sorcerer whose name holds the key to his power, whose deals are currency in a world of tangled fates. Here, he is layered, lover, father, monster, victim. It's a sharp departure from the quick, sharp exit he makes in the Grimm's page, but it shows how adaptable the frame is. Change the costume, shift the motives, and the bones still hold. In children's picture books, the imp has been recast as a mischievous helper, his threat of child stealing quietly dropped. The straw to gold scene remains too good a visual to lose, but the bargain is gentler, the resolution conflict-free. For parents, it's safer. For folklorists, it's another example of how stories are edited to fit the fears or comforts of their time. Even in internet culture, the name-guessing hook pops up in unexpected places. Jokes about "guess my password" or "call me by your name" wink at the idea that knowing a label gives you access, power, intimacy. In role-playing games and fantasy novels, the true name trope, banishing demons or binding spirits by speaking their hidden name, owes a debt to tales like Rumpelstiltskin, whether the authors know it or not. The psychological pull is obvious. Names are identity. In many cultures, they are guarded, revealed only in ritual or to trusted kin. To strip a name from someone or to know the one they hide is to cross a boundary. In Rumpelstiltskin, that boundary is the edge between life and loss, between keeping a child and surrendering them. It's primal and it's personal. Why does it endure? Because the scaffolding is universal. We all understand bargains. We all know the dread of an impossible task. We all feel the thrill of outwitting someone by discovering the one thing they thought you couldn't know. Whether the setting is a medieval tower, a Parisian salon, or a digital dungeon, the stakes translate. Imagine telling the story tonight not in a candlelit chamber, but at a crowded bar or across a campfire. You'd keep the setup tight, the boast, the trap, the helper, the price. You'd let the tension coil over the 3 nights, and just before the final reveal, you'd pause, lower your voice, and lean in. The whole room would follow you into that moment, waiting for the name. It doesn't matter if the earliest secure print is only 3 centuries old, or if the motif's roots stretch back further than we can prove. What matters is that it still works. Rumpelstiltskin is less a single character than a narrative machine, a reliable engine for suspense, wit, and the satisfaction of a loophole snapped shut. And maybe that's the real 4,000-year-old secret here. Not that this exact goblin danced around a fire in the Bronze Age, but that humans have always told stories about problems too big to solve and the tiny, perfect key that unlocks them. Sometimes that key is a word. Sometimes it's a name. Always, it's the moment the balance tips and the powerless become powerful. The wheel stops turning. The gold gleams in the dawn light. The little man is gone, but his echo, the sound of his name, still rattles in the attic of our collective memory. We're only scratching the surface. The next case is even stranger. Subscribe before it drops.